I'm Sarah, 32, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. As a hospital administrator, I'm used to taking care of others, but never expected my parents would teach me about family loyalty and then abandon me when it mattered most. The Christmas they left me alone while they vacationed in Italy still stings, especially now that they've come crawling back asking for financial help after their extravagance. Before I tell you how my parents abandoned me at Christmas for an Italian vacation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt taken for granted by family. Growing up as the middle child in the Williams family in Portland, I learned early on that responsibility was my assigned role. My parents, Michael and Donna Williams, ran a modest insurance agency that provided us with a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. From as far back as I can remember, I was the one my parents counted on, while my younger brother Tyler somehow escaped all expectations. "Sarah, make sure your brother gets his homework done," my mum would say as she rushed out the door for a client meeting. "Sarah, can you start dinner? We're running late at the office again." By age 12, I could cook a full meal, help Tyler with his math homework, and have the dishwasher loaded before my parents walked through the door. Meanwhile, Tyler spent his afternoons playing video games or hanging out with friends, his responsibilities beginning and ending with taking out the trash once a week. "Tyler's just not as mature as you," my father would explain when I complained about the uneven workload. "You should be proud that we can count on you." And I was proud in a way. I liked being dependable and earning their approval. What I didn't understand then was that I was being trained to accept an imbalanced family dynamic where my needs always came last. The message was clear, though never directly stated family comes first. But within the family, everyone else came before me. In high school, while my friends' parents funded their extracurricular activities and saved for their college funds, I started working at 16, taking weekend shifts at a local cafe. My first paycheck went toward a graphing calculator I needed for AP calculus. "We'd help if we could," my mother said, "but Tyler's baseball equipment is so expensive this season." Somehow, there was always money for Tyler's pursuits. I applied for every scholarship I could find and pieced together enough financial aid to attend state university while living at home to save on housing costs. I'd wake at 5 each morning to catch the early bus to campus, attend classes until 2, then work at the university bookstore until closing. Most nights I'd arrive home after 9, exhausted but determined. When I graduated with my healthcare administration degree, my parents attended the ceremony but left early to catch Tyler's intramural soccer game. Their congratulations felt perfunctory, as if my achievement was expected rather than celebrated. "That's our Sarah," my father said casually. "Always knew she'd figure it out." Landing my first job at Portland Memorial Hospital felt like a personal triumph, despite the muted reaction from my family. I started in a junior administrative role, working longer hours than anyone else and volunteering for the projects no one wanted. Within 3 years, I had earned 2 promotions and could finally afford to move into my own apartment. The small one-bedroom wasn't much, but it was mine, paid for entirely by my own efforts. My parents seemed almost surprised at my independence, as if they hadn't quite believed I could stand on my own. "You're really doing this?" my mother asked during my moving day, looking around the apartment with barely concealed skepticism. Rent is so expensive these days. What she didn't say, but I heard clearly, wouldn't it be better to keep living at home and helping us? Despite establishing my separate life, I remained the family's support system. When my parents decided to downsize after Tyler left for college, I took a week of vacation days to help them pack, organize, and move. My brother flew in for the weekend, made a show of lifting a few boxes, then disappeared with old friends, his contribution deemed sufficient. "Tyler's so busy with his new internship," my mother explained as we scrubbed the baseboards of their old house. "It's nice he could come at all." The pattern continued through my 20s. Tyler would call asking for temporary loans to cover his rent after spending too much on concerts or weekend trips. I'd transfer the money, knowing I'd never see it again. My parents faced their own financial challenges after some poor investment decisions, and I often found myself covering the gap. Just until our commission check comes through, my father would promise, though, the repayments rarely materialized. At family gatherings, I was expected to arrive early to help cook and stay late to clean. I coordinated gifts for extended family birthdays and kept track of important dates. If anyone needed a ride to the airport, help moving, or a place to stay, I was the first call. My friend Rachel pointed it out during our weekly coffee date. "Why are you always the one dropping everything for them? Does Tyler ever help out?" "He's different," I explained automatically. He's not good with details or planning ahead. Rachel gave me a look I couldn't quite interpret. That's convenient for him, isn't it? And your parents just accept that from him, but expect everything from you. I shrugged uncomfortably. That's just how families work. You help when you can. But her words stayed with me, a small seed of doubt taking root. Was it really about family, or was I simply being taken advantage of because I never said no? When I turned 30, I achieved a major professional milestone, being promoted to Associate Director of Patient Services. The position came with a significant salary increase, allowing me to save for a house deposit faster than I'd anticipated. I called my parents immediately after receiving the news, hoping they'd be proud of my achievement. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, distracted. "Did Tyler tell you about his new girlfriend? She works for a tech startup. Very impressive young lady." The conversation quickly shifted to Tyler's relationship and plans to bring his girlfriend to my parents' anniversary dinner next month. My promotion was already forgotten. I hung up feeling deflated but not surprised. Later that week, I met my brother for lunch, wondering if he even knew about my promotion. "Yeah, Mom mentioned it," he said, checking his phone as we waited for our food. "Congrats. Hey, I might be a little short on rent this month. Think you could help out?" "Just until my commission comes through." The familiar request should have annoyed me, but instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This was my value in the family, the reliable one, the provider, the supporter, not the one who receives support. "Shorty," I said automatically, even as something inside me began to question why I always said yes. Looking back, I should have seen that Christmas disaster coming. All the signs were there if I'd been willing to read them. As September turned to October, I began planning for what I hoped would be a special Christmas. After years of attending the holidays at my parents' house or various relatives' homes, I had finally purchased my own place, a spacious 2-bedroom townhouse with a real fireplace and enough room to host everyone. I wanted this Christmas to be perfect, a chance to show my family what I had accomplished, and maybe finally receive some recognition for it. I requested time off work 4 months in advance, sacrificing my chance at the higher holiday pay that many of my colleagues coveted. I wanted the full week around Christmas to prepare, decorate, and make everything perfect. "Taking the whole week, Sarah. That's unusual for you," my supervisor commented when I submitted the request. "Special plans." "I'm hosting Christmas this year," I said proudly. First time in my new place. I threw myself into planning. I researched recipes, created elaborate Pinterest boards of decoration ideas, and started shopping for the perfect gifts months ahead. Despite still paying down my moving expenses, I stretched my budget to buy thoughtful presents for everyone. A leather portfolio for my dad's business meetings, a spa package for my mum, and high-end wireless headphones for Tyler that he had been talking about for months. When my mother called in early November, I excitedly brought up my Christmas plans. "I was thinking we could do Christmas at my place this year," I said. "I have plenty of room now, and I'd love to host everyone." There was a slight pause before she responded. "Oh, you're not working the holiday shift this year." The question seemed odd, since I always tried to take at least Christmas Day off, even when I worked other holiday shifts. "No, I've already arranged for the whole week off." "Well, that's nice," she said vaguely. "We haven't really figured out our plans yet." "Let me talk to your father." I should have noticed her ambivalence, but I was too caught up in my own excitement. When I called the following week to confirm, she was equally non-committal. "We're still sorting things out," she said. "Tyler might have other plans this year." That should have been my second clue, but again I missed it. Tyler never had other plans for Christmas. It was the one holiday my parents insisted everyone attend. The first real sign of trouble came when I stopped by my parents' house unannounced in late November, bringing over some decorations my mother had stored in their basement that I wanted to use. As I came up the basement stairs, I overheard my father on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, both passports are still valid," he was saying. "Expires in June next year, so we're fine for the trip." When I entered the kitchen with the box of decorations, he quickly ended his call. "Sarah didn't hear you come in." "Just grabbing some Christmas stuff," I explained. "Who needs passports?" "Oh, just checking something for a client," he said dismissively. "Planning trip insurance." I nodded, accepting his explanation. My father often worked from home, and travel insurance was part of their business. Nothing seemed unusual about it then. A week later, I met Tyler for coffee. He seemed uncomfortable when I brought up Christmas, stirring his drink and avoiding eye contact. "So you'll be at my place for Christmas, right? I'm doing all the cooking this year." Yeah, about that," he started, then his phone rang. He checked it, looking relieved. Sorry, I need to take this work thing. He stepped outside to take the call, and when he returned, skillfully changed the subject to his new girlfriend and never circled back to my Christmas question. By early December, I had decorated my entire house. I had a 7-foot tree in my living room covered in twinkling lights and ornaments. I'd hung garlands along the banister, placed candles in every window, and even invested in festive guest towels for the bathroom. Everything was ready, but I still hadn't received a clear confirmation from my family. When I called my mother to nail down the details, she again seemed evasive. Mom, I need to know how many people are coming so I can plan the menu, I insisted. Is it just you, Dad and Tyler? Is he bringing his girlfriend? Oh, honey, I've been meaning to talk to you about Christmas, she finally said, her voice taking on the light casual tone she used when delivering bad news. We've decided to do something different this year. My stomach dropped. Different how? Well, your father and I have been working so hard, and we thought we deserved a special treat. We've booked a trip to Italy over the holidays. I gripped the phone tighter. Italy over Christmas. Yes, isn't it exciting? 2 weeks touring Rome, Florence and Venice. We leave on the 20th and come back January 3rd. The room seemed to tilt slightly. But what about family Christmas? I've taken time off work. I've decorated the whole house. Oh, we just assumed you'd be working like usual, she said dismissively. You always pick up those holiday shifts for the extra money. Not this year. I had specifically told her weeks ago that I'd arranged time off. She had simply chosen not to hear it. And Tyler? I asked, already suspecting the answer. A brief hesitation. Well, he and Jessica are coming too. She's always wanted to see Italy, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity for us to get to know her better. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only were my parents abandoning our family Christmas tradition, they were taking my brother and his new girlfriend on an exotic European vacation, while expecting me to spend the holiday alone. How long have you been planning this? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Oh, a few months now, she said casually. The flight deals were too good to pass up. A few months. They had known since September or October. All those times I had mentioned hosting Christmas, they had already booked their trip. They had deliberately kept me in the dark while making plans that excluded me completely. Were you planning to tell me? Or would I have found out on Christmas Eve when no one showed up? I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Don't be dramatic, Sarah, my mother said. We're telling you now. Anyway, you're always so busy with work, we figured you wouldn't mind. You could pick up some extra shifts and make some money. I already told you I took time off, I said, my voice shaking. I've been planning to host Christmas for months. Well, I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding, she said, not sounding sorry at all. But the tickets are non-refundable. I'm sure you'll find something to do. After hanging up, I called my father, hoping for a different response, perhaps even an apology. Instead, he seemed annoyed by my upset. Your mother and I work hard, Sarah. We deserve a nice vacation, he said firmly. It's not like we're never coming back. It's just one Christmas. But why didn't you include me? I asked. You're taking Tyler and his girlfriend. Well, you know how it is, he hedged. We had some loyalty points that covered part of their trip, and Jessica's parents contributed too. Besides, you couldn't take that much time off work, could you? And you just bought that house. We figured you couldn't afford it. They hadn't even given me the option. They had simply decided I wouldn't be included. You could always join us if you want, he added, knowing full well I couldn't possibly afford a last-minute trip to Italy during the holiday season, not after stretching my budget to buy a house and Christmas gifts. My last hope was my brother. I texted him immediately. We need to talk about Christmas. His response came hours later. Sorry about that. Mum and Dad really wanted to do this trip. Didn't know how to tell you. When I called him, his apology was half-hearted at best. Look, they invited me and Jess, and her parents offered to chip in. What was I supposed to say? Maybe what about my sister? I suggested. I figured they'd talk to you about it, he said, though I could tell by his tone he knew they hadn't. Anyway, it's done now. The tickets are booked. So I'm just supposed to spend Christmas alone while my entire family goes to Italy without me. You've got friends, right? He said, already sounding bored with the conversation. Look, I gotta go. Jess is waiting. As I hung up, the full reality of my situation hit me. My family had not only excluded me from their Christmas plans, but they had done so deliberately, hiding their trip from me for months while I excitedly planned to host them. The betrayal was complete, and for the first time I couldn't find a way to excuse or rationalize their behavior. This wasn't oversight or thoughtlessness. It was exclusion, plain and simple. And as I looked around at my carefully decorated house, the perfect tree, and the wrapped presents, I realized just how little my feelings mattered to the people I had always put first. I stood in my living room surrounded by Christmas decorations that suddenly seemed to mock me. The tree I had spent hours decorating, the garlands carefully draped along the banister, the festive centerpiece on my dining table, all prepared for a family gathering that would never happen. I felt foolish and small, like a child who had built an elaborate sandcastle only to watch the tide wash it away. The tears came suddenly and without warning. I sank onto my couch and sobbed until my chest ached and my eyes burned. Not just for this Christmas, but for all the times I had put my family first, only to be treated as an afterthought. For all the birthdays when my achievements went unrecognized, while Tyler's smallest accomplishments were celebrated. For all the times I had rearranged my life to help them without a single word of thanks. After the tears subsided, I stared at the pile of wrapped presents in the corner. What was I supposed to do with them now? Return everything? Save them for when my family eventually returned? The thought of keeping these carefully selected gifts for people who hadn't even considered my feelings made me feel pathetic. I picked up one of the packages wrapped in silver paper with a blue ribbon. My father's leather portfolio, purchased from an artisan shop downtown at considerable expense. Inside the card I had written, "For all your important meetings, proud of you, Dad." Now the sentiment felt hollow. Anger began to replace the hurt, a slow burning sensation that started in my chest and spread outward. I had always been the one to accommodate, to understand, to make excuses for their behavior. What would happen if just once I put myself first? The next morning, I began searching for ways to salvage my Christmas. Most of my close friends had long established family traditions or travel plans of their own. Rachel was flying to her parents' home in Chicago. My college roommate Megan was hosting her husband's entire extended family. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to be except me. I briefly considered volunteering at a local shelter or hospital, thinking at least my holiday could have some purpose, but discovered most volunteer positions had been filled months ago by people with the foresight I had lacked. People who, unlike me, hadn't naively assumed their family would include them in their holiday plans. I could have picked up shifts at the hospital. After all, most of my colleagues would have been grateful for the time off, but I had already arranged coverage, promising to take extra shifts for others in January to compensate. Going back now and admitting that my Christmas plans had fallen through seemed humiliating. I couldn't bear the pitying looks, the awkward invitations from people who didn't really want an extra person at their family table. So I decided to face reality. I would be spending Christmas alone. The thought was so foreign, so contrary to everything I believed about family and holidays, that it didn't quite seem real. Surely something would change. My parents would realize their mistake and call to apologize. My brother would feel guilty and stay behind to be with me. Someone would rescue me from this solitary Christmas. But as December progressed and my family's departure date approached, it became increasingly clear that no rescue was coming. My parents called twice. Both conversations focused entirely on their excitement about the trip and last-minute travel preparations. Neither mentioned my Christmas plans or expressed any concern about leaving me alone. "We'll bring you back something nice," my mother promised, as if a souvenir could compensate for their abandonment. On December 20th, the day of their departure, I made one last attempt to connect. I called to wish them a safe flight, hoping perhaps for a moment of recognition, a genuine acknowledgement of regret that I wouldn't be with them. "Thanks for calling, honey," my mother said briskly. "We're just heading out the door. The car service is here." "Have a great trip," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas to you too. We'll send pictures," she chirped, then hung up. That evening, I turned on the Christmas music I had been saving for our family gathering and opened a bottle of wine. As Bing Crosby sang about white Christmases, I scrolled through my Instagram feed and saw the first post from my brother, a selfie of him and Jessica at the airport departure gate, with the caption, "Italy-bound Christmas in Rome with the family, as if I wasn't part of it. By Christmas Eve, my social media feeds had become torture devices. My parents had apparently purchased an international data plan specifically to share their magical Italian holiday. There they were at the Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps, the Colosseum. Every few hours brought new images of their smiling faces against the backdrop of ancient monuments and picturesque cafes. Best family vacation ever. My mother captioned one photo of them all raising wine glasses at a trattoria in Trastevere. My father, rarely active on social media, had even posted a group shot in front of St. Peter's Basilica with the words, "Making memories with the people who matter most." The people who matter most. The words stung more than they should have. Around noon, my phone pinged with a text from my mother. "Merry Christmas Eve from Rome. Wish you were here." Attached was a photo of my parents, Tyler and Jessica, eating gelato despite the December chill. I stared at the message for a long time. Wish you were here, but not enough to have included me in the first place. Not enough to have even told me about the trip until I cornered them. The casual cruelty of it hit me anew. I turned my phone off after that, unable to bear any more evidence of their wonderful time without me. Instead, I microwaved a frozen dinner and watched It's a Wonderful Life, alone in my living room, surrounded by decorations, meant for a gathering that would never happen. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. I woke early, a lifetime of Christmas excitement difficult to shake despite everything. For a moment, still half asleep, I felt a flutter of anticipation before reality crashed back. I made myself coffee and sat beside my tree, looking at the presents still wrapped beneath it. On impulse, I reached for a small package I had tucked among them, a gift I had bought for myself and wrapped just to have one more package under the tree. It was a pair of pearl earrings I had admired for months, but considered too extravagant for my budget. In a moment of defiance, I had purchased them anyway. "Merry Christmas to me," I whispered, opening the box and putting them on. The day stretched endlessly ahead. I had planned an elaborate dinner, having purchased a small ham, potatoes, vegetables, and ingredients for dessert. Cooking for one person seemed pointless now, but I needed something to occupy my hands and mind. I spent the afternoon in the kitchen, preparing a feast no one would eat, setting my dining table with my best dishes, and lighting candles as if expecting company. The absurdity of this situation wasn't lost on me, but there was something defiant in going through with my plans, even if only for myself. As the ham was resting, my doorbell rang. For a wild moment, I imagined my family had somehow returned early to surprise me. Instead, I opened the door to find my elderly neighbour, Mrs. Abernathy, holding a small wrapped package. "Merry Christmas, dear," she said with a warm smile. "I noticed your car was still here and thought you might be spending the day alone. I brought you some of my gingerbread." Her simple kindness undid me completely. I burst into tears right there in the doorway, months of hurt and disappointment pouring out in front of this startled woman I barely knew. "Oh my," she said, patting my arm awkwardly. "Would you like me to come in for a bit?" Mrs. Abernathy sat with me while I cried, and then composed myself enough to explain the situation. She listened without judgment, occasionally nodding in understanding. "Family can hurt us more than anyone," she said simply, "because we expect more from them than anyone else." She stayed for a cup of tea, refusing my invitation to dinner with gentle firmness. "My son is picking me up in an hour, but you're welcome to join us if you'd like." I declined, not wanting to intrude on their family time, but her invitation warmed me nonetheless. After she left, I ate a small portion of my Christmas feast, packed the rest into containers, and later brought them to a nearby homeless shelter that I knew accepted prepared food donations. That night, as I sat alone in my darkened living room, illuminated only by the twinkling lights of my Christmas tree, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge a painful truth. My relationship with my family was fundamentally unbalanced, and always had been. I had given and given, making excuses for their neglect, telling myself that's what family does. But a voice inside me, growing louder by the hour, asked a simple question. Shouldn't it go both ways? The question followed me into uneasy dreams, and when I woke the next morning, something had shifted inside me. I didn't know what form it would take yet, but I knew things couldn't continue as they had been. Something had to change, and for the first time, I understood that the change had to start with me. Returning to work after Christmas brought its own challenges. Colleagues casually asked about my holiday, expecting cheerful stories of family gatherings. "How was your Christmas, Sarah? Did your parents like the house?" I fabricated vague responses. "It was quiet. Nice to have some downtime." The truth felt too raw, too humiliating to share. At home, I methodically removed all traces of Christmas. The tree that had taken hours to decorate was dismantled in 30 minutes. Garlands, wreaths, and festive knickknacks were packed away in storage bins. The unwrapped family gifts sat in a pile on my dining table, a silent accusation. After a week of looking at them, I finally made a decision. I returned what I could to stores, donated the rest to charity, and used the refunded money to book myself a weekend spa retreat for January. If my family could treat themselves to Italy, I could at least give myself one weekend of pampering. I started journaling, pouring out years of hurt and resentment that I had never allowed myself to fully acknowledge. Page after page filled with examples of times I had been taken for granted, expected to give, while receiving little in return. Seeing it all written down in black and white was both painful and clarifying. January 3rd. My parents and Tyler returned from Italy, tanned and full of stories. My mother called immediately, eager to share every detail of their magical experience. The food, Sarah. You wouldn't believe the pasta. And the museums. Your father actually enjoyed the art, can you imagine? And Tyler and Jessica are practically engaged after this trip. They're so perfect together. Not once did she ask about my Christmas or express regret for leaving me alone. When she finally paused for breath, I said, I should go, work early tomorrow, and hung up before she could respond. The following weekend, I met Rachel for our usual coffee date. She had just returned from her parents' home in Chicago and was full of her own holiday stories, but quickly noticed my subdued mood. Okay, spill it. What happened? You look like someone stole your puppy. I hesitated, then found myself telling her everything. The Italy trip, the exclusion, the lonely Christmas, the complete lack of acknowledgement or apology afterward. Once I started, I couldn't stop years of pent-up frustration spilling out between sips of cooling coffee. Rachel listened, her expression darkening. When I finally finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Sarah, I love you, but your family is taking advantage of you. They have been for years. She held up her hand when I started to object. No, listen to me. What they did wasn't a misunderstanding or an oversight. They deliberately excluded you from a family trip while making sure Golden Boy Tyler and his girlfriend were included. That's messed up. But they're my family, I said weakly. Being family doesn't give them the right to treat you like crap, she countered. And this isn't an isolated incident. You're always the one giving, they're always taking. When's the last time they went out of their way for you? When have they ever put your needs first? I couldn't answer because I couldn't think of a single example. Later that week, I had lunch with my mentor from the hospital, Dr. Eleanor Jensen. In her 60s now, Eleanor had taken me under her wing when I first started at Portland Memorial. She had a way of cutting through problems with surgical precision, and I found myself confiding in her about my family situation. You know, she said thoughtfully after I finished, I went through something similar with my own sister years ago. I was always the responsible one, the one who would drop everything when she needed help. One day, I realized our relationship only went one way. It was painful to create boundaries, but necessary. What happened? I asked. She was furious at first, accused me of not loving her anymore. Eleanor smiled slightly, but eventually our relationship found a new equilibrium, a healthier one. Sometimes people don't change until they're forced to. My next therapy session brought even more clarity. Dr. Martinez had been helping me work through anxiety issues for the past year, but we had rarely discussed my family dynamics in depth. What you're describing is a classic pattern of emotional neglect, she said after I recounted the Christmas incident. You've been cast in the role of family caretaker, and they've come to expect your support without reciprocating. So what do? I asked, feeling both validated and overwhelmed. Start by recognizing that you can't change them, only how you respond to them. Begin setting boundaries, small ones at first. Pay attention to how they react when you don't immediately meet their needs or expectations. That will tell you a lot. A few days later, a casual comment from a colleague became another piece of the puzzle. We were discussing a difficult patient who made endless demands of the nursing staff. Some people just develop a sense of entitlement when it comes to caregiving, she remarked. They start to believe their needs always come first because that's what they're used to. It's like that in families too. Her words hit home. My family's entitlement to my time, energy, and resources had developed because I had never challenged it. I had made myself endlessly available, so they saw my availability as a permanent state rather than a choice I was actively making. That evening, I created a spreadsheet detailing the financial support I had provided to my family over the past 5 years. Loans to my brother that were never repaid. Extra contributions to family gifts when others couldn't afford their share. Covering the security deposit on my parents' new apartment when they downsized. Buying my father a new laptop when his crashed before an important presentation. The total made me gasp over $15,000. Money that could have gone toward my retirement home improvements or simply enjoying my life had instead disappeared into the black hole of family emergencies that somehow only I was expected to solve. The next day, my phone lit up with a text from Tyler. Hey sis, hate to ask, but I'm short on rent again. Could use $800 until my commission comes through next month. We'll pay you back this time, promise. It was the same message I had received countless times before, and I had always responded the same way with an immediate transfer and a cheerful, no problem. This time I took a deep breath and typed, sorry, I can't help this time. Maybe ask mum and dad. His response was almost comically predictable. Seriously, you know they're tight after the Italy trip. Come on, I really need this. The guilt rose automatically, the familiar urge to solve his problem, to be the reliable sister he could always count on. I had to physically put my phone down and walk away for 10 minutes before returning to type, I'm not able to help this time. Good luck figuring it out. He sent several more messages alternating between guilt trips and promises, but I didn't respond. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The following month, my parents invited me to attend a family reunion in Portland. I had already scheduled a weekend away with friends to a yoga retreat I had been looking forward to for months. In the past, I would have automatically cancelled my plans to accommodate my family's request. Sorry, I already have plans that weekend, I said simply when my mother called. What plans could be more important than family? She asked, sounding genuinely baffled. A trip I've been looking forward to, I replied, offering no further explanation. Well, can't you reschedule? Your cousins are coming all the way from Seattle and everyone's expecting you. The familiar guilt rose like a tide, but I pushed it back down. No, I can't reschedule. I hope everyone has a great time. Afterwards, I felt both guilty and strangely liberated. The sky hadn't fallen. The family reunion would proceed without me. And most importantly, I had honored a commitment to myself, something I had rarely done when it conflicted with family expectations. These small acts of boundary setting felt like revolutionary acts, each one building my confidence for the confrontation I knew was coming. Because my family's pattern of taking me for granted was so deeply entrenched, I understood instinctively that a major test of my new boundaries was inevitable. I just didn't expect it to arrive quite so dramatically. February brought unusually heavy rain to Portland, matching my parents' increasingly gloomy mood. I noticed the shift during our occasional phone calls, their usual energetic descriptions of social events and travel plans replaced by vague responses and abrupt endings. Initially, I attributed it to post-vacation blues, the natural letdown after their extravagant Italian holiday. The first concrete sign of trouble came when my father mentioned temporary cash flow issues during a brief call about an unrelated family matter. Just a bit tight until some commissions come through, he said casually. Nothing to worry about. I made a non-committal sound where once I would have immediately offered assistance. The conversation moved on, but I filed away the comment, a small warning flag. A week later, my mother called to cancel our monthly lunch date, citing the need to watch expenses for a bit. When I suggested we could meet at my place instead of a restaurant, she quickly made an excuse about being too busy, further confirming my suspicion that something beyond simple budgeting was occurring. During a rare visit to their apartment in early March, I noticed subtle but telling changes. The premium cable channels they had always insisted on were gone. The specialty coffee my father imported from a boutique roaster had been replaced by supermarket brand. My mother, who religiously visited her hairstylist every 6 weeks, was sporting visible roots and a home dye job. Most telling was the absence of my father's prized watch, a luxury timepiece he had treated himself to after a particularly successful year in the insurance business. When I casually mentioned it, he touched his bare wrist and muttered something about having it cleaned. Tyler, unsurprisingly, was oblivious to these signals. When I carefully brought up our parents' apparent budget tightening during one of our infrequent phone calls, he dismissed my concerns. They've always been dramatic about money stuff, he said. Remember when Dad acted like we were going bankrupt because he had to replace the transmission in his car? They're fine. But the evidence suggested otherwise. The final confirmation came when I spotted my mother selling her designer handbags on a local buy and sell group. These were items she had collected over years, often highlighting them as investment pieces. Seeing them casually discarded online for quick cash sent a clear message. Whatever financial situation my parents were facing went beyond temporary belt tightening. I decided to address it directly during Sunday dinner at their apartment, a recently reinstated tradition that my mother had insisted upon with unusual determination. I noticed she had prepared a simple pasta dish rather than the elaborate meals she typically served when hosting another small but significant deviation from normal. As we finished eating, I took a deep breath and dove in. Mom, Dad, is everything okay financially? I've noticed some changes lately. My father stiffened while my mother busied herself collecting plates. "Everything's fine," he said sharply. "Just being a bit more careful these days. Inflation, you know." "Dad," I said gently, "Mum is selling her handbags online. You're not wearing your watch. Something's going on, and I'd rather you just tell me what it is." My parents exchanged a long look, having one of those silent conversations long married couples perfect. Finally, my mother sighed and sat back down. "We've had some financial setbacks," she admitted, carefully avoiding my eyes. "Nothing we can't handle." My father, always the more direct of the two, apparently decided there was no point in further pretense. "The Italy trip was more expensive than we anticipated," he said heavily. "Much more." "How much more?" I asked. He named a figure that made me gasp. "That's more than my down payment on my house." "Well, we wanted it to be special," my mother said defensively, "and the exchange rate wasn't in our favour. We put most of it on credit cards," my father continued, ignoring her interjection. "The plan was to pay it off with our year-end bonuses, but the agency didn't perform as well as expected last quarter." "Okay," I said slowly, trying to process this information. "So you're carrying some credit card debt. That's not ideal, but it's manageable, right?" Another look passed between them. "It's more complicated than that," my father admitted. "We used our home equity line of credit for part of it too. For a vacation." I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "Not just for the vacation," my mother jumped in. "We had some other expenses last year, and things just piled up." "What other expenses?" I asked, though I was starting to see the picture more clearly. "Well, we helped Tyler with his car repair in September," she said. "And then there was Jessica's birthday gift. We wanted to make a good impression." I remembered the small gift they had mentioned getting for Tyler's girlfriend, a weekend spa retreat at one of Portland's most exclusive resorts, the same place I had splurged on a single-day treatment for myself after Christmas. "And we had to replace the refrigerator," my father added. "Plus the trip to your cousin's wedding in San Diego last summer." The list continued, each item a discretionary expense that could have been scaled back or eliminated. Not once did they mention emergency medical bills, essential home repairs, or other unavoidable costs. They had simply spent far beyond their means, counting on future income that hadn't materialized. "How bad is it?" I finally asked when they ran out of justifications. My father named a total sum that made my earlier gasp seem like a mild reaction. They were underwater by an amount that would take years to pay off at their current income, especially with the high interest rates on credit cards. "The real problem is the home equity loan." My father explained, his business background finally asserting itself as he laid out the facts. "We've missed 2 payments, and if we miss another, the bank has made it clear they'll start foreclosure proceedings. You could lose your home." I was stunned. "It's not quite that dire," my mother insisted, though her expression betrayed her fear. "We just need to catch up on the payments and negotiate a new payment plan." "And how do you plan to do that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I could see it in the hopeful look my mother gave me, in the way my father suddenly became very interested in straightening the tablecloth. "Well," my father said carefully, "we were hoping you might be able to help us out, just until we get back on our feet." And there it was, the request I had been expecting since I first noticed the signs of their financial distress. The assumption that I would step in and clean up their mess, just as I had done so many times before. "How much are you asking for?" My voice sounded calm, detached, as if we were discussing a business transaction, rather than my parents potentially losing their home. They named an amount that represented nearly my entire emergency fund savings I had carefully accumulated over years of disciplined budgeting and occasional sacrifices. "It would just be a loan, of course," my mother added quickly. "We'd pay you back as soon as things turn around." "Like Tyler pays back his loans?" I couldn't help asking. My father had the grace to look embarrassed. "This is different. This is our home. Have you asked Tyler to contribute?" I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear them say it. "Well, he's not in a position to help right now," my mother said right on cue. "He and Jessica are saving for their own place, and his job isn't as stable as yours." Get this. Translation, they hadn't even asked him. I was the only one expected to sacrifice my financial security. "I need some time to think about this," I said, finally pushing back from the table. "It's a lot to take in. We don't have much time," my father reminded me, an edge of desperation in his voice. "The next payment is due in 2 weeks. I nodded, gathered my things, and left without committing to anything. As I drove home, emotions churned within me, rage at their irresponsibility, fear for their housing situation, guilt at my hesitation to help, and beneath it all, a simmering resentment that once again I was expected to be the family savior, while my brother contributed nothing. I had set small boundaries over the past weeks, saying no to minor requests and assertions on my time. But this was the real test. This was where I would discover if I could truly break the pattern of putting everyone else's needs before my own, even when the stakes were impossibly high. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with calculations and consequences. If I gave my parents the money they needed, my carefully built emergency fund would essentially disappear. The financial safety net I had created through years of careful saving would be gone, leaving me vulnerable if my own emergency arose. And based on past experience, the likelihood of seeing that money again was minimal, regardless of my parents' promises. On the other hand, if I refused, my parents might actually lose their home. Could I live with that knowledge? Would I be able to look at myself in the mirror, knowing I could have prevented their eviction, but chose not to? The next morning, bleary-eyed from lack of sleep, I called my financial advisor, Angela. We had worked together for the past 3 years, planning my path to home ownership and now focusing on retirement savings and investments. I need to discuss a potential large withdrawal from my emergency fund. I explained outlining the situation with my parents. Angela's concern was immediate. Sarah, this raises several red flags for me. First, emptying your emergency fund leaves you extremely vulnerable. Second, from what you've described, this sounds less like helping your parents through a genuine crisis and more like enabling financially irresponsible behavior. But it's their home, I said, voicing the thought that had kept me awake. Yes, a home they put at risk to fund a luxury vacation they couldn't afford, she pointed out. I understand they're your parents, but consider this: if they don't address the underlying spending issues. What happens when they run into trouble again, and without your emergency fund? What happens if you lose your job or face a major medical expense? Her questions didn't make my decision easier, but they did frame the situation more clearly. This wasn't just about one financial rescue. It was about a pattern that would likely continue unless something fundamental changed. That afternoon, I met Rachel for coffee and laid out the whole situation. Absolutely not, she exclaimed before I'd even finished explaining. Sarah, they excluded you from Christmas, went on a luxury vacation they couldn't afford, and now they expect you to bail them out. That's insane. But if they lose their home, then they face the consequences of their actions just like every other adult on the planet, Rachel said firmly. Look, I know they're your parents and you love them, but giving them this money won't solve the real problem, which is that they make poor financial decisions and then expect you to fix everything. Her outrage on my behalf was validating, but I still felt torn. That evening, I called Dr. Martinez and scheduled an emergency therapy session for the following day. You're facing a classic dilemma between taking care of yourself and taking care of your family, she observed after I explained the situation. But there's an important distinction to make here, between love and enabling. What's the difference? I asked. Love supports growth and health even when it's difficult. Enabling prevents natural consequences and actually hinders growth, she explained. If your parents don't experience the results of their financial decisions, what motivation do they have to change their behavior? So you think I should refuse? I can't make that decision for you, she said gently, but I can suggest that whatever you decide, it should include clear boundaries. If you do choose to help financially, it should come with conditions that address the underlying issues. Otherwise, you're just putting a band-aid on a problem that will continue to bleed. Later that week, I had dinner with my mentor, Eleanor. After decades in hospital administration, she had a wealth of experience dealing with difficult decisions and complex family dynamics. I faced something similar with my sister years ago, she told me after I explained my predicament. She and her husband made a series of poor financial choices, then came to me when they were about to lose their car. I was tempted to write a check and solve the problem. Did you? I asked. No, she said simply. Instead, I connected them with financial counseling resources and offered emotional support during a difficult time. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, watching them struggle when I could have easily fixed it in the short term. But you know what happened? I shook my head. They figured it out. They sold some assets, took on extra work, negotiated with creditors. It wasn't easy, but they did it themselves. And more importantly, they learned from it. They never ended up in that situation again. Kaishan. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people solve their own problems. Each conversation clarified my thinking, but the decision still felt impossible. I spent hours researching resources for homeowners facing foreclosure, creating lists of options my parents could pursue that didn't involve depleting my savings. The weekend before I needed to give my parents an answer, I barely left my house wrestling with the decision. I reviewed my own finances repeatedly, calculating how long it would take to rebuild my emergency fund if I helped them. I imagined scenarios my parents keeping their home, but continuing their spending habits versus my parents downsizing to a more affordable place and learning financial responsibility. I also examined my own motivations honestly. Part of me wanted to help because I genuinely cared about my parents' well-being. But another part, the people pleaser who had spent a lifetime seeking approval, wanted to be the hero to earn the validation I had always craved but rarely received. Sunday night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, writing out the pros and cons of each option. As midnight approached, I finally set down my pen, a strange calm settling over me. The decision had crystallized not from calculating the financial impact, but from recognizing a deeper truth: I could not continue sacrificing my well-being to compensate for choices others made, even if those others were my family. I slept soundly for the first time in days. When I woke Monday morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I called my parents and arranged to meet at my house that evening after work. I wanted neutral territory for the conversation, someplace where I felt secure and in control. I spent the day mentally rehearsing what I would say, preparing responses to their likely reactions. When I arrived home, I took time to change into comfortable clothes, make a cup of tea, and center myself before they arrived. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. My parents stood on my porch looking anxious but hopeful, clearly expecting good news. I led them to the living room, where I had deliberately arranged the seating so they would sit together on the couch while I took the chair opposite them. "Have you made a decision?" my father asked as soon as they were seated, not bothering with small talk. I took a deep breath. "Yes, I have, but first I want to talk about Christmas." My parents exchanged confused glances. "Christmas?" my mother repeated. "What does that have to do with our current situation?" "Everything," I said firmly. "When you planned your trip to Italy, you deliberately excluded me. You made family plans that left me completely alone for the holiday, and you did it without a second thought." "Sarah, we've been through this," my father said impatiently. "It wasn't personal. We just thought that I wouldn't mind, that my feelings didn't matter." I finished for him. "That's the point. For as long as I can remember, my needs have always come last in this family. I'm expected to help, to give, to sacrifice, while everyone else, especially Tyler, gets the support, the consideration, and now the luxury vacations." My mother's expression hardened. "That's not fair. We've always treated you and your brother equally." I actually laughed at that. "Mom, that's simply not true, and I think you know it. I put myself through college while you paid Tyler's tuition. I've bailed him out financially countless times. I took time off work to help you move. I host family events, coordinate gifts, and show up whenever anyone needs anything. When's the last time any of you did the same for me?" The question hung in the air unanswered. "Here's what I've decided." I continued into the silence. "I'm not going to give you the money." My father's face flushed with anger. "So you're just going to let us lose our home after everything we've done for you?" I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. I'm not giving you the money, but I am offering to help in other ways. I've researched options for homeowners in your situation. There are hardship programs, negotiation strategies with lenders, debt consolidation options. I'm willing to help you navigate those resources. I'm also willing to help you create a realistic budget and financial plan going forward. We don't need financial advice," my mother said coldly. "We need the money to save our home. What you need is to change the patterns that got you into this situation," I countered. "The vacation you couldn't afford, the ongoing support of Tyler, while expecting nothing from him, the living beyond your means. If I just give you the money without addressing those issues, we'll be right back here in 6 months or a year." "I can't believe how selfish you're being," my father said, his voice rising. "This is our home we're talking about." "I know it is," I said, working to keep my voice calm despite my racing heart. "And I care about that. But I also care about my own financial security and about not enabling behaviors that will ultimately hurt all of us." "So that's it?" my mother asked, tears welling in her eyes. "You're just going to abandon us when we need you most?" The guilt hit me like a physical blow. This was their most effective tactic, one that had worked countless times before, but this time I was prepared for it. I'm not abandoning you, I said firmly. I'm offering real help, just not in the form of a blank check. And I'm doing it because I love you too much to continue participating in patterns that aren't healthy for any of us. Your brother was right, my father muttered, standing abruptly. He said you'd turned cold, that you've changed. Listen. So they had already discussed this with Tyler, despite claiming they hadn't asked him for help. Another manipulation revealed. I have changed, I acknowledged. I've realized that real love sometimes means saying no. It means having boundaries. It means expecting mutual respect and consideration. Well, I hope you're happy with your boundaries when we're living in a shelter, my mother said, dramatically gathering her purse. There are many options between getting a bailout from me and living in a shelter, I pointed out. And my offer to help you explore those options stands. But the emergency fund I've worked for years to build is not one of those options. They left shortly after, my mother in tears, my father barely containing his anger. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a complex mix of emotions, guilt and doubt, but also an unfamiliar sense of pride and even liberation. For the first time in my life, I had prioritized my own well-being in a significant way. I had no illusions that this was the end of the matter. My parents would likely continue to pressure me, possibly enlist other family members to do the same. But a line had been drawn that couldn't be uncrossed. I had publicly declared that I deserved the same consideration I had always given others, that my needs mattered too. Whatever happened next, that fundamental shift in our family dynamic would remain. And despite the pain of the confrontation, despite the uncertainty ahead, I felt more at peace than I had in years. Something broken inside me had finally begun to heal. The following weeks were exactly as difficult as I had anticipated. My parents initiated what could only be described as a campaign to change my mind, alternating between guilt trips, anger, and occasional moments of apparent understanding that inevitably circled back to, but we still need the money. Dear Garson, my mother called my aunt, who then called me with concerns about what I was putting my parents through. My father sent emails detailing worst-case scenarios if they lost their home. Even my brother finally got involved, calling to tell me I was being unreasonable. They're our parents, Sarah, he said, his voice heavy with disapproval. You can't just let them lose everything. Have you offered to help them financially? I asked calmly. A telling pause. You know I'm not in a position to do that right now. But you're in a position to call and pressure me to use my savings. Savings I built by not going on luxury vacations and not asking others to bail me out repeatedly. That's different, he said defensively. How? He couldn't answer that either. Despite the pressure, I maintained my position. I continued to offer assistance with financial planning help, researching assistance programs, and emotional support, but I did not waver on my decision about the money. Each time I held firm, I felt my resolve strengthen a little more. What surprised me most during this difficult period was my brother's gradual shift in attitude. After our initial confrontational call, he reached out again a few days later, his tone notably different. I've been thinking about what you said, he admitted, about how I've never had to deal with the consequences of my spending habits because you or mum and dad always covered for me. It was the first time he had ever acknowledged the pattern. That's been the dynamic for a long time, I agreed cautiously. I talked to Jess about it, he continued. She pointed out some things I hadn't really noticed about how differently our parents treat us. Like what? I was genuinely curious about his perspective. Like how they never ask me to help with family stuff, but expect you to handle everything. Or how they've bailed me out countless times, but are shocked when you need something. Quite so. He sounded genuinely uncomfortable with the realization. Jess said if I was a better brother, I would have noticed how unfair it was years ago. His girlfriend Jessica, whom I had met only briefly, was rising rapidly in my estimation. It's not entirely your fault, I said, surprised by my own generosity in that moment. This dynamic developed over many years, and we all played our parts in it. Maybe, but I could have been more aware, he paused. Anyway, I told Mum and Dad to stop pressuring you about the money. I said we should look at other options, like maybe selling some of their stuff or downsizing. I was genuinely shocked. How did they take that? Not great, he admitted with a small laugh. Dad hung up on me, but I think it was the first time anyone besides you has ever suggested they might need to change their approach. That conversation marked a subtle but significant shift in my relationship with Tyler. For the first time, he was seeing our family dynamics clearly and acknowledging his own role in them. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was a beginning. Meanwhile, my parents were facing the reality of their situation. After exhausting their efforts to change my mind, they began reluctantly exploring the options I had researched for them. My father contacted their lender to discuss hardship programs. My mother started selling more of her designer items this time, with a practical focus rather than resentment. 2 weeks after our confrontation, they accepted my offer to help them create a realistic budget. I spent a Sunday afternoon at their apartment reviewing their income expenses and debts, helping them identify areas where they could cut back significantly. I had no idea we were spending that much on dining out, my mother admitted, looking genuinely surprised at the figure on the spreadsheet. Or on premium cable channels we rarely watch, my father added. Small recognitions but important ones. They ultimately worked out a modified payment plan with their lender, sold one of their cars in favor of sharing a vehicle, and made other significant lifestyle adjustments. They didn't lose their home, though the experience came close enough to genuinely frighten them. Throughout this process, I maintained clear boundaries while still offering support. I checked in regularly, provided encouragement for the positive changes they were making, but consistently redirected any hints about financial assistance back to the resources and strategies we had discussed. Our relationship was strained at times, uncomfortable at others, but slowly evolving into something more balanced. They began to see me not as an endless resource to be tapped, but as an adult with my own needs and limitations. The change wasn't always comfortable for any of us, but it was necessary and ultimately healing. As the immediate financial crisis eased, I found myself focusing more on my own life, which had often taken a back seat to family demands. I rediscovered old interests, joined a hiking group, and even began dating again after a long period of being too busy with work and family obligations. I met David at a hospital fundraiser, a pediatrician with kind eyes and an easy laugh, who asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to the answers. Our first date stretched from coffee into dinner as conversation flowed effortlessly. By our third date, I found myself sharing some of my family history, testing how he would respond to the complexity of it all. "It sounds like you've been the emotional backbone of your family for a long time," he observed. "That's a lot of responsibility to carry." "It is," I agreed, "but I'm learning to balance it better now, to take care of myself too." "That's important," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. "The strongest people often forget they need support too." His understanding meant more than I expected. Dating had always felt like a luxury I couldn't afford given my family and work commitments. Now I was making space for it for myself, for possibilities beyond the narrow role I had occupied for so long. As Christmas approached again, I felt a familiar anxiety. The previous year's wounds were still tender, and I wasn't sure how to approach the holiday. To my surprise, my mother called in early November with an unexpected suggestion. "We were thinking of doing Christmas differently this year," she said, an uncharacteristic hesitancy in her voice. "Something simpler, more meaningful. Maybe everyone could come to your house since you didn't get to host last year. We could all bring dishes to share." The acknowledgement of last year's exclusion was subtle but unmistakable, the closest she had come to addressing it directly. I took a moment to consider how I felt about the suggestion, checking in with myself, rather than automatically agreeing as I would have in the past. "I'd like that," I said, finally, genuinely meaning it. "But I'd need everyone to commit well in advance. No last-minute changes." "Of course," she agreed quickly. "We'll be there, whatever happens." And they were. Christmas that year was nothing like the elaborate celebration I had once envisioned, but it was real and present in ways that mattered more. My parents arrived early to help with preparations, bringing homemade side dishes rather than expensive wine. Tyler and Jessica came bearing thoughtfully chosen gifts and stayed to help clean up afterwards. We played board games, shared stories, and created new traditions that reflected our evolving relationships. It wasn't perfect. Old habits sometimes resurfaced, moments of tension arose. But underneath it all was a new foundation of mutual respect, an acknowledgement that we were all equal members of this family, each with needs and boundaries worthy of consideration. As I watched my family gathered in my living room that Christmas evening, the fire crackling, laughter flowing more naturally than it had in years, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought us to this point. The Christmas spent alone had been devastating, but it had also been the catalyst for necessary change. My parents' financial crisis, while difficult, had forced a reckoning with unhealthy patterns that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. In the quiet moment, while everyone was distracted by a particularly competitive round of charades, I slipped away to my bedroom and took a moment alone. On my dresser sat a small wrapped package, The pearl earrings I had given myself last Christmas, when no one else had been there to celebrate with me. I put them on looking at my reflection in the mirror. "You did good," I whispered to myself. And for once, I completely believed it. The woman who stared back at me was different from the one who had decorated an empty house a year ago. She had learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary. That love without respect wasn't really love at all. That family could evolve and heal even after deep wounds. Most importantly, she had learned that taking care of herself wasn't a luxury or an afterthought. It was the foundation upon which all healthy relationships must be built. I returned to the living room, pearl earrings catching the light from the Christmas tree. My mother noticed them immediately. "Those are lovely, Sarah. Are they new?" "They're from last Christmas," I said simply. "A gift I gave myself." "A ghost island." She held my gaze for a long moment, understanding passing between us. "They suit you perfectly," she said finally. And in that small exchange was everything: acknowledgement of past pain, appreciation of present strength, and hope for a future built on more solid ground. As I looked around at my family that Christmas night, I realized that the journey wasn't over. We would face more challenges, make more mistakes, need to reinforce boundaries again and again. But something fundamental had shifted, and we were moving, however imperfectly, in the right direction. The greatest gift that difficult year had given me wasn't the newfound respect from my family, though that was precious. It was the knowledge that I could stand firm in my own worth, that I could weather rejection and disapproval to honor my own needs, that I could love deeply while still loving myself. These were lessons hard won, but ones I would carry forward into every relationship, every challenge, every Christmas yet to come. What experiences have you had with setting boundaries in your family? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that put your needs first when others were counting on you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to stand firm in your own worth.